News anchor Iris Delgado was delivering a report in front of Philadelphia City Hall for the Spanish-language network Telemundo in 2016 when a woman approached, tapped her on the shoulder and said, "Excuse me." Delgado ignored the stranger, who proceeded to grab her by the hair and punch her in the face. The unexpected gesture of hostility shocked Delgado's co-anchor, who could be heard saying, "Oh my God," in Spanish. Just moments later, Delgado returned to the screen and, unflinchingly, continued to deliver the report. The attacker, 37-year-old Wahida Wilson, pleaded guilty to assault and received a 60-day jail sentence. Her reasons for punching Delgado remain unclear to this day, but she apologized for her actions during her sentencing hearing and reassured the judge that she wasn't going to reoffend. Number 15. Phoenix helicopter collision. In late July of 2007, Phoenix-based news stations KNXV-TV Channel 15 and KTVK Channel 3 deployed helicopters to track a high-speed police chase from above while broadcasting the pursuit in progress from a bird's-eye view. The choppers collided with one another. One of the helicopters broke apart in mid-air while the other nose-dived to the ground. The doomed choppers landed in a park, bursting into flames upon impact and killing all 4 individuals aboard. Among those who lost their lives were KNXV-TV pilot Craig Smith and photographer Rick Krolak, as well as KTVK pilot Scott Bowerbank and photographer Jim Cox. National Transportation Safety Board (NTSB) officials concluded that both pilots were at fault for failing to see and avoid each other. Authorities said that distraction was mainly to blame for the collision, and the seemingly avoidable tragedy prompted serious discussions about how to avoid having something similar happen in the future. The downed choppers were just 2 of 5 helicopters that were in the area. In a historic first, news networks agreed to share a helicopter moving forward to prevent the past from repeating itself. Number 14. Mirela Vida. Romanian TV host Mirela Vida was in the midst of hosting a news show called Access Direct in early 2021 when she looked off screen and screamed. Just a moment later, a naked woman stormed onto the set with a brick in her hand. Vida looked terrified as the unclothed intruder hurled the brick at her. Luckily, she moved out of the way in time to avoid being hit, and crew members swiftly sprang into action to prevent anything worse from happening. The network switched to commercials while the crew focused on getting the situation under control. Vida later revealed that it took 6 people to drag the crazed woman off the set before turning her over to the custody of law enforcement. The 2 women were unacquainted, despite the attacker's seemingly personal disdain for Vida. As the police handcuffed her, she could be heard screaming about how she wanted to kill the TV host. Perhaps not surprisingly, she was taken to the hospital for a mental evaluation. This incident, coupled with some excessively mean correspondence Vida had received throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, caused her to suspect that the social isolation the virus brought to the world had caused people to become even nastier and more desensitized than they already were to begin with. Number 13. Colleen Campbell. In early June of 2017, 28-year-old Philadelphia-based news reporter Colleen Campbell went on an expletive-ridden tirade at a police officer outside the Helium Comedy Club. She was off the clock at the time, and she seemed to believe that she was also off camera, but a bystander recorded the incident with their cell phone and wasted no time sharing it on social media. In the video, Campbell could be heard calling the cop an effing piece of you-know-what as she was escorted out of the club. She also tried to spit on the staff member who walked her outside and called responding officers several other inappropriate names throughout the remainder of the 5-minute clip. Campbell also bragged about working at an effing news station during the enraged tirade and denied doing anything to warrant being kicked out of the club. She could have probably left the club peacefully and avoided legal problems, but was charged with assault due to her behavior. According to comedian Will Sylvince, who filmed the outburst, Campbell was booted from the venue because she was disturbing the performance with very obnoxious and loud whispering. Sylvince conceded that Campbell did not appear to be intoxicated, but described her as nevertheless disruptive with her conduct. He went on to say that the officer that the woman's rant was directed at had tried his best to keep the peace upon arriving at the scene, but that Campbell simply refused to act reasonably. The footage went viral almost immediately, and Campbell was promptly fired from her job with news network PHL 17 shortly thereafter. The disgraced former reporter publicly apologized for her actions and said that she felt ruined by the video. In a perhaps unexpected twist, however, she managed to salvage her career after relocating to Florida and is currently working as a meteorologist for the Tampa-based station WTSP, which covers the region encompassing Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg, and Sarasota. Number 12. Shaquille Brewster. NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster was covering Hurricane Ida in Gulfport, Mississippi in late August of 2021 when a man pulled up to the scene in a pickup truck, exited the vehicle and ran up to the camera while yelling at Brewster to report accurately. Brewster calmly tried to avoid confrontation by acknowledging that a random person was approaching and having the cameraman shift the lens away from the stranger. He continued to deliver his report, or at least tried to, as the man continued to shout at him. Thanks to help from viewers, authorities identified the on-camera intruder as 54-year-old Benjamin Eugene Dagley of Wooster, Ohio. Dagley was charged with assault for disrupting Brewster's segment, and as it turned out was already on probation at the time for an unrelated case. He traveled from Ohio to Mississippi without permission from his probation officer, prompting authorities to launch a manhunt. Once he was identified as the man in the infamous news video, Dagley's probation was revoked as a result of his unwise actions, and the judge overseeing his case sent him to prison for the remaining 3 years of his sentence. Number 11. Megan Mackey. In early 2019, California-based KRCR-TV anchor Megan Mackey was tasked with covering a mass fentanyl overdose at a residence in Chico, which resulted in at least one person dying and 14 others experiencing life-threatening medical emergencies. The incident sparked fears among both law enforcement and the community, who worried that the overdoses marked the beginning of a local fentanyl crisis. During Mackey's live broadcast, a woman approached but remained off camera and asked her if she knew she was being disrespectful. Moments later, another woman could be heard yelling at the newswoman to get the F out of there. Mackey dropped her camera and the two women became entangled in a physical struggle while a man shouted at them to stop. Mackey defended herself in a tweet, stating that she was just doing her job by reporting the facts about a major incident. She also reassured her followers that she was shaken but okay. The anchor went on to thank her supporters and the police and vowed not to let the incident stop her from continuing to report on the truth and inform the public even during times of tragedy. Number 10. Political debate turns violent. At the height of the ongoing Syrian civil war in 2014, a Jordanian talk show called Bain Itijahain, or Between Two Ways, hosted a debate about media freedom in the violence-riddled country. During the program, a tense discussion took place between journalists Shair al-Johari and Mohammed al-Jayoussi. Complete chaos broke out when al-Jayoussi accused al-Johari of being a deviant who supported a revolution in Syria where rebels were fighting to remove President Bashar al-Assad from power. Al-Jahadi fired back by accusing al-Jayusi of having financial incentives for supporting al-Assad's regime. The men began pushing the debate table back and forth at each other, eventually causing it to break and flip over. The host abruptly intervened and ended the segment before the set-wrecking activities could continue, bringing the debate to an admittedly bizarre end. Number 9. David Hammer and TJ Pipitone. In March of 2022, Louisiana-based WWL-TV investigative reporter David Hammer and photojournalist TJ Pipitone were tasked with tracking down a convicted predator named Brian Matherne, who had mistakenly been released from prison early after serving 22 years of a 30-year sentence and was a wanted fugitive. The pair located Matherne in Tangipahoa Parish and paid a visit to his residence in an attempt to get his side of the story, but were confronted by Matherne's brother-in-law, Bruce Verdin, who swung a wrench and tried to hit Pipitone with his truck. Thankfully, no one was seriously injured in the incident. Verdin was charged with 3 counts of felony, aggravated battery, and 1 count of aggravated damage to property. He pleaded no contest to the charges in March of 2023, roughly a year after the attack, and received a 3-year suspended prison sentence along with 3 years of probation. His attorney, Garrison Jordan, explained his client's decision by stating that it is not an admission of guilt, but that it just meant that Verdin decided not to fight the charges in exchange for receiving a probated sentence. Furthermore, Jordan explained that the parties involved disagreed about what had actually happened. Verdin did not seem very remorseful for his actions. He laughed in the courtroom while the victims delivered impact statements, scoffing at Hammer's remark about how he felt fortunate that neither he nor Pipitone was seriously injured. Pipitone said to Verdin, "I'm glad you find it funny," to which Verdin replied, "I don't find it funny, I just disagree." Number 8. Ken Curtis. Reporter Ken Curtis was unexpectedly attacked by a public official in October of 2015 while working for the Alabama-based news station WTVY. The incident occurred when Curtis was questioning Dothan City Commissioner Amos Newsom about his controversial 2013 election victory, which was fraught with allegations of voter fraud. In the video, it was clear that Newsom wasn't interested in answering any questions. But like many journalists, Curtis erred on the side of diligence and persisted in an effort to get Newsom to talk. Instead of taking the bait, Newsom struck Curtis square in the face with his hand and said, "Excuse me." Curtis could be heard saying, "Sir, you cannot do that." But it was evident that Newsom did not care to stick around for further discussion. Even though he had just gotten physically attacked, Curtis continued to follow Newsom to his vehicle, asking if he would be willing to resign from his position due to the election controversy. Newsom struck Curtis again, this time in both the face and chest, leaving the anchorman with a bleeding facial wound. Both parties stood at a somewhat safe distance from one another while conversing with their associates about how to proceed with the situation. Curtis's colleagues could be heard encouraging him to walk away from the situation, while Newsom stood next to his vehicle and spoke with a man who appeared to be trying to calm him down. As Newsom got into his van and drove away from the scene, Curtis could be heard reassuring an upset female co-worker that he was fine. Newsom was later arrested on third-degree assault. He was released from custody after posting a $500 bond and was initially sentenced to 10 days in jail and fined $500. But he challenged the ruling, and the assault charge was ultimately dropped in exchange for his agreement to attend anger management classes. Newsom also managed to avoid any charges in connection with the alleged voter fraud, but his longtime girlfriend and several other associates were charged for their roles in the scheme. His girlfriend, Olivia Reynolds, and a few other defendants either pleaded guilty or were convicted of the charges they faced. In hindsight, the outcomes of these cases shed some light on why Newsom wasn't so keen to speak with Curtis when confronted with some difficult and perhaps incriminating questions. Number 7. Tara Edwards. In 2012, Detroit-based news reporter Tara Edwards was tasked with speaking to a man named Jeff Brown, who contacted 7 Action News about illegal garbage dumping in a residential area in broad daylight. According to the news outlet, Brown got into his vehicle and tried to chase down the person who committed the unlawful act of leaving large chunks of wood in the middle of the street. He managed to obtain the suspect's license plate number and passed the information on to law enforcement, but was deadly upset when nobody came to clean up the mess. A team from 7 Action News managed to track down the owner of the truck, Ihor Stetskiewicz. Edwards paid a visit to the man's residence, where the crew found the same truck in his driveway that Brown had seen speeding away from the scene of the illegal wood dumping. Moreover, the man's yard was covered in chunks of wood that were similar in size and appearance to the pieces that had been left in Brown's neighborhood. When Evans confronted Stetskiewicz about the matter, he replied that he doesn't take orders from women. The hostile interviewee went on to say that he was planning to return to the site where the wood was dumped and clean it up, but only had $1 worth of gas in his vehicle at the time of the incident. He even went as far as calling himself Mr. Cleanup during the bizarre Q&A, which only further devolved when Edwards asked Stetskiewicz why he sped off when confronted at the scene. He replied, "It must have been a woman, and I don't listen to women yelling. I tell them to shut up," to make an already uncomfortable situation even more strange. Stetskiewicz insisted that he only meant to do good in the community and that he lifts the heavy chunks of wood that he removes from people's properties all by himself, with no help from anyone. He went on to state that he helps all types of guys, including old guys, disabled guys, black guys, white guys, Polish guys, Ukrainian guys, and guys from Mars. Perhaps not surprisingly, he did not mention that he helps any women, and the unusual interview concluded. Number 6. Sophie Walsh and Ben Avery. 2 Australian 9 news reporters were assaulted in London just hours apart while covering Black Lives Matter protests in June of 2020. The network's Europe correspondent, Sophie Walsh, was attacked off-screen in Hyde Park during a morning broadcast. According to reports, a man yelled "Allahu Akbar" and grabbed her while making stabbing motions. Walsh could be heard screaming to the cameraman, who chased after the attacker with a light stand. The anchor woman apologized for the incident and quickly resumed her segment, explaining that an unarmed man had just ran up to her and grabbed her. As it turned out, however, officers found a screwdriver in the man's possession, resulting in his arrest on suspicion of threats to kill and possessing an offensive weapon. Additionally, the suspect reportedly made a bomb threat amid the chaos. Speaking with the Today Show in the aftermath of this shocking act of violence, Walsh said, "I don't think anyone knows the sound of their true scream until they're in a situation like that where they feel like it's a life or death scenario." Thankfully, she emerged from the incident emotionally shaken but physically unscathed. Later that same day, 9 News correspondent Ben Avery and cameraman Cade Thompson were pursued by an angry mob of demonstrators who confronted them during a live broadcast. The pair realized that they were being targeted when it became clear that a group of protesters was surrounding them on purpose. When Avery and Thompson tried to walk away, they were followed into a nearby tunnel. A member of the angry mob snatched Avery's microphone, and before he and Thompson knew it, they were being chased down the road by dozens of protesters. They became separated from their security guard, who was doing his best to protect the 2 newsmen, but was no match against the size of the pursuing crowd. Thankfully, Avery, Thompson, and the security guard escaped the situation with just minor injuries, with Avery suffering a painful facial wound after being struck by a flying bottle. He said that it seemed like there was a police officer for every protester who was present, but that the large law enforcement presence somehow failed to ensure his safety. Number 5. Southern television broadcast interruption. During his career as an anchor for the Southern Television's Independent Television News, or ITN, Andrew Gardner appeared regularly in news broadcasts throughout southern England. But the events of November 26, 1977 only happened once throughout his many years on television. On what began as a typical Saturday evening broadcast, the picture on people's TV screens began to wobble, and the audio was replaced by a deep, buzzing sound. For the next 6 minutes, a distorted voice identifying themselves as a representative of the Ashtar Galactic Command named Vrillon delivered a bizarre message for most of the speech. The signal hijacker rambled about how humans have to give up their evil ways and embrace a more peaceful lifestyle. He also warned that society's time to follow this advice was running short. At the end of the speech, Gardner's broadcast returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. Located near the village of Hannington, the transmitter that was used to broadcast the interruption was particularly susceptible to being hijacked. At the time, it was one of just a few transmitters that were capable of rebroadcasting an off-air signal from another transmitter, rather than being fed directly by a landline, making it vulnerable even to a low-powered signal intrusion. But it would have still taken a decent amount of technical knowledge to pull off the bizarre stunt, and the identity of the culprit remains a mystery to this day. Number 4. Imtiaz Khan Farhan. A live political discussion went terribly awry in June of 2019 when the leader of Pakistan's ruling Tehreek-e-Insaf Party, Masroor Ali Sial, lost his composure during an argument with journalist Imtiaz Khan Farhan. The disagreement escalated into violence when Sial got out of his seat and pushed Khan to the ground. A physical fight broke out between the men, and the scuffle moved off screen as Sial kicked and slapped Khan. The brawl was broken up by crew members and the show's other guests, who sprang into action to separate the two parties. Things cooled down surprisingly quickly. Sial immediately returned to the screen and resumed the discussion that was going on among panelists. Khan rejoined the conversation a few minutes later as if nothing had happened. Footage of the attack quickly went viral, with many condemning Sial for his disrespectful behavior. Some even called on Pakistan's Prime Minister, Imran Khan, to take action against Sial for disgracing the political party they both belonged to. Others found the fight amusing. News sources failed to report on what the men were arguing about in the first place. Number 3. Isa Balado. Spanish journalist Isa Balado was in the middle of reporting live along a street in Madrid when a man approached and grabbed her behind right in front of the camera. He proceeded to ask Balado what program she worked for, at which point one of the newswoman's colleagues asked her if the stranger had just groped her rear end. Balado replied yes, and asked the man if he really had to touch her behind while asking what network she worked for. The grabber, who was later identified as a Romanian national, tried to laugh off his behavior like it was no big deal. He denied any wrongdoing and then apologized for his actions, only to stare at Balado while she pleaded with him to leave her alone so she could do her job. The handsy suspect proceeded to ignore Balado's request to be left alone and touched her hair. Staff members from the news outlet alerted the police, and the man was arrested at the scene before officers escorted the perpetrator away in handcuffs. Balado called him an idiot and instructed her cameraman to catch footage of his face. The suspect was released on bail shortly after his arrest, and the outcome of the case is unclear. Today's topic was requested by The No One, Richard Hertz 7331, Chris Brown Lexicus, Nikki 123BXD, and Kai Meraga 6146. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Lara Logan. While covering Egypt's Arab Spring demonstrations from the country's capital of Cairo in 2011, CBS correspondent Lara Logan was stripped and violated by a mob of angry men. Years later, she told Newsweek that the crowd initially seemed pro-American, but the situation devolved quickly when she started to feel hands grabbing at her body in especially unwelcome places. Logan, her security guard, and other film crew members tried to run away from the crowd, but protesters ran after them and continued to make unwanted advances toward the newswoman. At some point during the chaos, Logan lost her grip on her security guard and became separated from the rest of her crew. This was when the worst of the assault occurred. Logan fought back against her attackers with all her strength, but she was vastly outnumbered. There was nothing she could do to stop the assailants from having their way with her, but she survived the indescribably traumatic event by thinking of her children, which gave her the strength she needed not to give up. The attack finally ended when the men dragged Logan to an area where some women were camped out. These female demonstrators alerted some Egyptian soldiers to the situation, and they intervened and took Logan to her hotel, where a doctor immediately sedated her. She was flown back to the United States, where she spent several days in the hospital, receiving treatment for her injuries. Logan later sued New York Magazine for publishing an article about the incident, which she claimed tarnished her career. But the publication stood by its reporting, claiming that the piece was thoroughly fact-checked. The beleaguered news anchor blamed the magazine for CBS's decision not to renew her contract in 2018. More recently, in April of 2020, she told Newsweek that she can't forgive or forget the fact that certain reports claimed that she was merely groped by the men who assaulted her and that her attackers didn't do anything worse to her. Logan's career experienced a revival of sorts that year when Fox News contracted with her for the filming of a segment called Lara Logan Has No Agenda. Since then, she has been rebranded as a far-right journalist in the eyes of the popular media, as she continues to work from a conservative angle and for Republican-leaning news outlets. If you thought it couldn't get any worse for these news reporters, find out how bad it can really get when you're in the limelight. For those of you who haven't seen it yet, we've got 8 performers who got attacked on stage coming right up for you after number 1. Number 1. The Max Headroom Incident. Chicago-based Channel 9 sportscaster Don Rowan mysteriously disappeared from people's TV screens, seemingly out of nowhere in the middle of his evening broadcast one night in late November of 1987. The segment was suddenly replaced by a figure donning a mask resembling the British fictional character Max Headroom, who bobbed around on the screen to the tune of a loud buzzing noise. This continued for roughly 30 seconds before the network's engineers managed to get Rowan's broadcast back on the screen. Someone had hijacked Channel 9's signal, and investigators initially assumed it was an inside job due to the amount of know-how that they believed would have been required to pull off a prank of this magnitude. They were shocked to discover that the transmission actually came from an undisclosed location outside the studio, and the intrusion wasn't over. 2 hours later, the masked figure interrupted another local network's nighttime programming and stated in a distorted voice, "That does it, he's a freaking nerd." While laughing maniacally, the individual made several other bizarre statements, hummed the tune of a Temptations song, flipped off the camera, moaned, and then, in a most unusual grand finale, bent over with his rear end exposed while a female figure struck his behind with a fly swatter. Viewers were creeped out, to say the least. Meanwhile, the Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, poured heavy resources into trying to identify the person or persons responsible for the hoax, but they had no luck, and the case remains unsolved to this day. Further investigation revealed that the perpetrator executed the prank with relative ease. Contrary to the initial assumption that they would have needed technical expertise or connections to a station insider, all it took to pull off the signal intrusion was good timing and the correct placement of the antenna that was used. Law enforcement determined that the hoax was carried out in a local warehouse district, but that was the closest they ever got to solving the mystery. On the evening of June the 18th of 2023, fans of American pop singer Bebe Rexha piled onto the rooftop at Pier 17 in Manhattan's South Street Seaport for a concert put on by the Brooklyn native. Towards the end of the show, a member of the audience hurled a cell phone at Rexha, hitting her square in the face. The assailant was quickly identified as 27-year-old Nicholas Malvana from Manalapan, New Jersey. While being interrogated by police, Malvana admitted to throwing the phone at Rexha, stating that he thought it would be a funny prank if he managed to hit her. According to court documents, the Grammy-nominated artist was in substantial pain following her performance. She later posted a picture of her bruised eye and lacerated eyebrow on social media, saying, "I'm good, yeah, I'm feeling all right." Malvana's attorney claimed that the dangerous stunt was part of a TikTok trend in which a celebrity takes a selfie with a fan's phone during a performance, then gives it back. Malvana claimed that Rexha was looking in his direction when he tossed the device and thus thought that she would catch it. A day after the concert, Malvana appeared in Manhattan criminal court, charged with assault and harassment. The man, described by the media as a luxury dog kennel worker, was freed without bail, with his attorney stating that he would likely have all of his criminal charges dropped under a plea agreement. Number 7. Shooting of MC Daleste. Tragedy struck during a live performance by Brazilian musician MC Daleste, born Daniel Pellegrini, on July the 6th of 2013. The 20-year-old funk singer and rapper had organized a free concert at a public housing project in Campinas, Sao Paulo, with upwards of 3,000 people in attendance. He was midway through the show when he abruptly collapsed on stage, as captured on video by several audience members. The footage, which later went viral on YouTube, showed Daleste rapping in his signature style before suddenly falling backwards onto the ground in a seated position. He was brought to a nearby hospital where he was pronounced dead. The young man, it would later come to light, had been shot in the abdomen by someone in the crowd. Local authorities released very little information about Daleste's death in the years following the incident. To this day, Brazilian police have yet to identify a suspect, let alone make an arrest. Rumors began to circulate that the rapper found himself in the crosshairs of a police officer that night because of the prevalent anti-law enforcement sentiment embedded in many of his lyrics. Daleste was one of the most prominent figures of the so-called ostentatious funk genre. The musical style, based heavily on American hip-hop, often involved songs that referenced criminal activity and disdain for the police. In one of Daleste's songs, he explicitly stated that killing the police is our goal, while rapping over the sound of gunshots. Although the true nature of the young man's killing has yet to be revealed, his death helped make ostentatious funk one of the most popular music genres in Brazil. Number 6. Extension Concert Ball. Prior to his death in the summer of 2018, Florida rapper Jose Dwayne Ricardo Onfroy, better known as Extension, was involved in a number of controversial incidents that made him a polarizing figure within the rap scene. On the night of June the 7th of 2017, Onfroy held a concert at the Observatory North Park in San Diego, California. The event drew hundreds of people to the iconic venue, a restored 1930s theater in the heart of the city's trendy North Park neighborhood. As captured on video, Onfroy was in the middle of performing one of his songs when a man emerged from the side of the stage and approached him. The individual proceeded to sock the rapper in the face, knocking him unconscious. The scene erupted into chaos as people stormed the stage, triggering an all-out brawl. Onfroy was carried to safety, but the violence continued in his absence. During the dust-up, a concert-goer was stabbed, though the injury wasn't considered life-threatening, and the victim was released from the hospital after receiving treatment. No arrests were made in the incident's wake. However, it was reported that the man who attacked Onfroy was associated with San Diego rapper Rob Stone. At the time, the two artists were in the midst of a feud that also involved Onfroy's close friend, fellow Florida rapper Ski Mask the Slump God. Stone later released a diss track in which he directly referenced the attack at the observatory, warning that Onfroy should not come back to California. In October of 2017, though, Stone indicated that he and Onfroy had squashed their beef entirely. Number 5. Cavern Club Attack. On December the 29th, of 2018, singer Jay Murray was on stage at the Cavern Club in Liverpool, England, a venue famous for hosting the Beatles during their come-up in the 1960s. The man was in the midst of performing the iconic Neil Diamond song Sweet Caroline when a male audience member suddenly walked onto the stage, grabbed him by the legs and knocked him over, as shown on video. The bearded assailant then kicked Murray while he was on the ground. A brief struggle ensued, after which the attacker ran off stage, followed closely by an enraged Murray. In the aftermath, the venue took to social media to clarify that it was an unprovoked attack. The announcement also stated that Murray fortunately escaped without any major injuries. The singer later revealed that in the moments following the end of the viral video footage, he beat his attacker up in a fit of rage but declined to press charges. Number 4. Marvin Totally. In January of 2018, audience members at a comedy club in South Carolina were left in shock after witnessing a performer get attacked on stage. Comedian Steve Brown was doing a set at the Comedy House in Columbia on January the 20th. According to eyewitness accounts from that night, Brown focused a number of derisive comments towards a man sitting in the front row. Although the playful ridiculing elicited laughter from the rest of the audience, the man Marvin Totally was very displeased with Brown's verbal jabs. At some point during the show, Totally became fed up and jumped out of his seat to attack the comedian. As captured on the cell phone video, the man grabbed the microphone stand and swung it at Brown several times. Eventually, Totally lost his grip of the stand, causing it to careen into the crowd, striking 2 bystanders. Police were called to the scene, at which point Totally was arrested, charged with 3 counts of assault and battery of a high and aggravated nature. As of the latest updates on the matter, the 28-year-old was being held at the Richard County Jail on a $65,000 bond. During a press conference, the county sheriff pondered, why would somebody lose control over a comedian making fun of them, before adding, you've got to have tough skin if you're going to a place like that. Brown posted a picture of a cut on his arm that he sustained during Totally's attack. He went on to joke that the next time he was on the road, he was going to call it the I Need Security Tour. Number 3. Will Smith. The slap, heard around the world, as it would come to be known, occurred on stage at the 94th Academy Awards in Hollywood, California on March the 27th of 2022. The now infamous incident unfolded as comedian Chris Rock presented the award for the Best Documentary Feature. Rock made a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith's shaved head, which angered the latter's husband, famed performer Will Smith, in an act that was widely discussed, criticized and parodied in the weeks and months that followed the Oscars. Smith marched onto the stage, walked right up to Rock and slapped him in the face during the live television broadcast. What followed was an extended moment of stunned silences. Smith returned to his seat and shouted profanity at Rock, who continued the presentation despite being visibly shaken by what had transpired. Later on in the evening, Smith won the award for Best Actor. During his acceptance speech, he apologized to the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. However, he later resigned his Academy membership, facing the likelihood of being suspended or banned. Smith was also prohibited from attending any Academy events for 10 years. Number 2. Isaiah Lee. Comedian Dave Chappelle performed at the Hollywood Bowl Concert Hall in Los Angeles on May the 3rd of 2022. The legendary funny man was headlining the Dave Chappelle and Friends show as part of the Netflix Is a Joke festival. At some point during his set, Chappelle began touching on hot-button topics, namely the controversial jokes that he made about transgender people, as well as homelessness. One young man seated in the audience of thousands took particular exception to the comedian's comments. Just as he was about to walk out, the audience member climbed on stage and attacked Chappelle, knocking him to the ground. Security personnel, as well as members of Chappelle's entourage, quickly stepped in and removed Lee from the stage. Despite the unnerving incident, Chappelle subsequently finished his performance. Among those who rushed to the comedian's aid was actor Jamie Foxx, prompting Chappelle to joke, Whenever you're in trouble, Jamie Foxx will show up in a sheriff's hat. Lee, who suffered a broken arm in the scuffle with security, reportedly had a replica handgun with a knife in his possession. He told police that he carries the weapon for his protection because he views himself as a minor celebrity. While explaining his decision to charge the stage, the man stated that he found the comedy show's content triggering. He faced several criminal charges, including battery, possession of a weapon with intent to assault, and unauthorized access to the stage area during a performance. Following Lee's public outburst, his former roommate accused him of stabbing him during a fight at a transitional housing apartment the previous December. In connection with that incident, Lee was charged with attempted murder. Number 1. Cardi B concert altercation. On July the 29th of 2023, New York rapper Cardi B was performing live on stage at Dry's Beach Club in Las Vegas when an unruly fan tossed a white drink cup at her. As shown in viral video clips taken by witnesses, the charismatic hip-hop artist immediately retaliated upon being hit by the cup, throwing her handheld microphone back at the unidentified female concert goer. Cardi berated the fan as her security team intervened, but upon retrieving the microphone, she continued her performance. On Twitter, footage of the altercation garnered 25 million views in a matter of days, with many commenters expressing support for the rapper. In the incident's aftermath, a fan tried to press charges against Cardi for tossing her microphone into the crowd. However, upon further investigation, the Clark County Police Department decided not to move forward with the case. Thanks for watching. For the rest of your life, would you rather only be allowed to watch and read Fox News or CNN? Let us know in the comments section below.